Phoenix Systems, patented tools for the perfect brake job.
Hi, I'm John Petty from Phoenix Systems. We're the pioneers in brake fluid copper testing. When your brake fluid reaches 200 parts per million, it's time to change it. One common question we hear is, I flushed the brake system, did an after test, and it still shows copper in the brake fluid. Why? Well, the simple answer is you still have copper in the system. You need a better brake fluid flush technique. We found the nastiest brake fluid we could find, thanks Ben, and we're going to show you with common brake service tools one method to properly flush a brake system and get that copper out. We're going to show you the brake fluid copper test on this vehicle. It's very simple. Just dip the strip in for a second, and you can see it's already turning purple. We'll let that strip sit for a little more than a minute, and you can see this brake fluid needs to be flushed. We're right in between 200 and 300 parts per million copper. We had to replace our bleeder screws. We also want to coat them with Phoenix Systems special thread sealant. This prevents any leakage of air or fluid out of the bleed screw threads during the variety of bleeding techniques. All right, we've got our tool all set up here and ready for pressure flushing. We've got the right rear bleeder screw open. We've got the capture assembly set up to that. So fluid is going to flow through the brake system and out that right rear wheel. The fluid path through this master cylinder reservoir avoids what we call a quick take-up area, a no pressure, a low pressure zone within a master cylinder. The key is to be able to divert that fluid path through the master cylinder into that chamber so that we can flush that high volume area out. Now, how we do that is with a brake pedal depressor. We just have to push the brake pedal in about an inch, and the piston moves in the master cylinder and it changes the flow path. Now you'll also notice that we have a block under that pedal. That will help prevent the pedal from depressing fully to the floor. We finished our pressure flushing using the brake pedal depressor to change that fluid path through the master cylinder reservoir. But what I'm going to show you is a way to combine two very common techniques. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to pressurize the master cylinder. By the way, we've put our extra long outlet hose on. And while I've got that pressure on, I am just going to depress the brake pedal. We've run just about 18 ounces of total fluid through each bleeding technique through this right rear wheel circuit. And you can see that when we did the pedal flushing, the fluid was starting to look pretty clear, but you can see that the fluid has still got contaminants in it. And we'll repeat this procedure at each of the wheels, and in that way we'll be able to remove a majority of all contamination within the system. We've performed some after testing and we want to show you what we found. Here's our original test right in between 200 and 300 parts per million copper. Here is an after test in the master cylinder reservoir, and we're right in between the 30 and 100 volume in the after test. This test was done at one of the calipers, and you can see that we're right in the 30 range. This is acceptable, but this goes to show an excellent example of why the reservoir needs to be thoroughly cleaned. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to clean this reservoir out. Remove the master cylinder reservoir off of this vehicle, and we want to show you what the inside of this thing looks like. We just shook it around a little bit, and this is what's coming out of the reservoir. Now we already ran a half a gallon of brake fluid, approximately a little less than a half a gallon of brake fluid through this thing. And you can see that this reservoir is really the source of a tremendous amount of contamination, if you can see that. Now, just to give you an idea, we ran a test just underneath the reservoir, and you can see what the copper level content was just below the reservoir. It was about right around 10 parts per million. All right, we just got this vehicle back from a thorough test drive, and we're going to retest the brake fluid. Let's run through this. This right here was our before test. We're somewhere between 250, right around 250 parts per million copper. This was the after test when we were demonstrating the contamination that can still be left in the master cylinder reservoir even after a half a gallon of brake fluid runs through the system. This right here was what we tested right beneath the master cylinder reservoir when we pulled it off. And you can see that that's in about the 30 part per million range. This was what we tested at the wheels. And that too that's somewhere between the 10 and 30 range. This right here was our after test, after driving the vehicle and pulsating the brakes and getting some fluid circulation. And this was a test immediately after cleaning out the reservoir. This is an unfair test right here because the fluid didn't have any time to circulate. What we'll expect to see in about 2 weeks in this vehicle, we're probably going to end up with about a 30 part per million average in this vehicle within a couple weeks' time as everything circulates around. So this is really a powerful demonstration of a couple of key things to getting copper out of the system. One is you need to clean the master cylinder reservoir out first. That needs to be the first step. So you get all of the contamination that's been stored in there, that's in the cracks and crevices, get that out so you're not pushing it through the rest of the system. So you can just use pristine brake fluid for the rest of your flush. You'd get better results than we achieved here. Next thing to remember, to use a brake pedal depressor. Open that low and no pressure zone of the master cylinder and get fluid in there. Get fluid in that area where standard pressure flushing will not reach. Next, remember to do a combination of bleeding techniques. You can do pressure and pedal flushing. That's what we demonstrated for you today. You could also do a combination of vacuum and pedal flushing. That will also work. The idea is to use the brake pedal to move fluid through the system. Keep in mind you need to put a stop under that pedal so you don't exceed the normal piston travel within that master cylinder bore. This is a great highlight of what you can expect to achieve by doing a proper brake fluid exchange.